Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu participated at the Saudi Africa Summit in Riyadh, the Saudi Arabian capital, to attract foreign direct investment to Africa's largest economy and mobilize capital to build needed infrastructure. It seems to be yielding some positive result. At the summit over the weekend, Nigeria and Saudi Arabia, among other things, agreed to a series of investment and cooperation ideals, including a pledge by the Saudi government to invest in the revamp of Nigeria's oil refineries and provide financial support to sustain the government's foreign exchange performance. Now, this morning we'll be talking about this, looking at the gains of Nigeria's participation at the first Saudi Africa Summit and better ways the country can make these agreements and Nigeria's commitment to attracting more foreign direct investment and expanding diplomatic and business partnerships in reinforcing the ongoing domestic economic reforms. We have joining us via Zoom Steve Nwachukwu, who is economist and also a financial analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak, Steve.
Always my pleasure. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. All right, Steve, to start off this conversation, each time you mention Saudi Arabia, to many Nigerians, you are talking about Hajj, even when there are many other things that Nigeria could benefit from the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Nigeria. How would you describe the relationship between the Saudi Arabia and Nigeria as of now, in terms of trade, of course?
Well, of course, you cannot take away the first point that you made. That's religious and that's spiritual fraternity with Saudi. You can't take that away. That is first and foremost, because just like we also have some level as Christians, we have some level of that relationship with Israel because of the spiritual content of Israel with Nigeria for the Christians and that of Saudi for the Muslims. So, but on business time, we also have some levels of relationship, or what you can say, we are into crude, they are into crude, they have well experienced, they have developed their oil and gas or their oil sector very much well. That in fact, Saudi is the largest crude oil producer of the world, close to about 10 million barrels per day. So if it's in experience, if it's in capacity, if it's in knowledge, they are well experienced and well rooted than Nigeria. So we have a couple of relationships, but like I said, it has a spiritual and business. But regards to the movement or the journey of our president in this very Saudi African summit, where we saw a good number of African leaders gathered to discuss the interest of Africa vis-a-vis the interest of Saudi, and the opportunities available and the businesses that is open for Nigerians to actually benefit from. Like I talked about the issue of oil, quite essential, because one, we are an oil producing country, and Saudi is one of the richest oil producing countries in the world. So it's quite a huge opportunity for Nigeria to open up our oil sector for the investors in Saudi to look in areas where they can participate. There are so many areas, both on the downstream, the upstream, and even in the lubricants, the lubricant plants and the rest of them that can be also be invested in. But my happiness is that there is an interest to also look into Nigeria and tap into those opportunities available. So it's a good development that we have to participate in that very summit. But the truth or the questions many Nigerians will also be asking is, what is Mr. President or what is the presidency coming back home with? What level of extraction of commitment from these very investors? We have these very common grants that we talked about. How much can we benefit from it? Saudi also have this very tourism attraction, yes, but mostly 90% of the tourism attraction of Saudi is on spiritual ground. People go there on vacation, on spirituality, improving their lives and the rest. We can also develop on that aspect of tourism, whereby we can finance or tap into areas where we also have opportunities, where the Saudis can also visit Nigeria for whatever reason, for realizations and the rest. But most importantly is the visible economic trades that can exist between. One thing is sure, we cannot export crude to Saudi. They have crude oil in abundance. The fact, like I said earlier, they are the highest producer of petroleum products, of crude. And like I said, it's close to about 10 million barrels per day. We are in fact struggling to produce 1.2 million, but they are producing 10 million barrels per day. So in these areas where they have well-developed capacity, knowledge above us, we can also have some level of bilateral where we can have partnership, if it's to learn from them how they've affected their system, to have a maximum oil production, less bend down, less stoop low, to learn from those who have already gained the experience more than we do.
All right, Steve, earlier you mentioned what will the president bring back to the country? And we have seen how, when it comes to foreign investment, Nigerians are quick to give, and the receiving is not really, beneficial to the nation. Earlier, I think yesterday, there was a report coming out saying that people that traveled for religious, spiritual purpose to Jeddah, that's Saudi Arabia, were deported because they wanted to deport about 260 people, but then there was a negotiation and it had to come back to 170, which already there was a bilateral agreement between these two countries about these things. So right now it's like they're going back on their words on that one. So do you think Nigeria is in a best position to demand, a strong commitment where there won't be hitches and issues in the future?
First and foremost, I will not be able to comment on what happened because I see yet and of no official statement from our embassy or from the Foreign Affairs Ministry what actually happened. I know for sure there are permutations or rumors what it might have been, but let's get to hear an official statement from government, because I know till tomorrow Nigerians are still going to Saudi for Hajj. It's an open thing. Nigerians has been going. So I don't know what happened actually, why this very 200, over 260 Nigerians who traveled to Saudi has the fact their visa was revoked. So meaning they already have a visa and it was now revoked. So let's get to have an official statement from both sides, from the Saudi authorities and from Nigerian authorities, so that we can actually know what really happened. But like you said earlier, there is a lot of a lot of demands or expectations of Nigerians in most of these very bilaterals, in most of these very agreements that government continue to have that we are not seeing yielding fruits. It's also embarrassing to us as Nigerians. Our president is in Saudi, having some bilateral, both on traveling, both on petroleum, foreign, and even for trades. And you are having Nigerians. I know for sure that 70 to 80% of those who are in that very flats may not be going for spiritual purposes or for spiritual reasons. So some are there for businesses. And our president is in Saudi to strike out some bilaterals on businesses. And Nigerians who are also traveling to Saudi are being deported. So I think it's conflicting. This was the wrongest time for Saudi to have deported these Nigerians. For sure, it takes the wrongest time to have deported this Nigerian. But what may has happened, like I said, we are yet to hear officially from the authorities of the Saudi and Nigeria who can be able to pinpoint. But it doesn't speak well of our visit to Saudi. Our president is still there, and this happened.
Okay. Steve, what is clear is that it appears that there are difficulties in implementing some of the memorandum of understanding between Saudi and Nigeria. I recall that the first agreement for cooperation between Nigeria and Saudi Arabia was first signed in 2003, October 2003, which led to the establishment of the Nigeria-Saudi Joint Commission. And now that commission had its first session in 2013, and the second session was supposed to hold 2 years later. That didn't happen until 2022 before we saw that commission meet again. So if you like, you may say that the commission is just really not as active as we would expect it to be. Now, in the recent trip, we hear that the agreements, part of the agreements is that the two countries agree to work with each other, and that Saudi government through Saudi Aramco will invest in the revamp of Nigeria's 4 decrepit state refineries, which is expected to be completed within 2 to 3 years. How confident are you that some of these agreements reached will actually materialize, considering the decades-long relationship Nigeria has had with Saudi Arabia, and yet, as of now, we can't even talk about any trade volume between Nigeria and Saudi Arabia. An interview with the Foreign Affairs Minister, last year, Yahya Lawal, the foreign ambassador, rather, Nigeria's ambassador to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Yahya Lawal, actually showed that there was just zero trade volume between Nigeria and Saudi Arabia. Largely, it has been informal. So with all the engagements we've had in the past, yet this is where we are as regards Nigeria-Saudi relations. So how confident are you that recent promises, will actually come to fruition?
I love that. Excellent question. Like you said earlier, it happens, unfortunately, that our relationship, our whatever with Saudi is on spiritual ground. Like I said earlier, you can't take away that. That is the first and foremost relationship we have with Saudi. On spiritual ground, people go for Mecca for spiritual endowment and upliftment or enrichment. So Nigeria needs to change its foreign policy on that regards. Like you talked about the commission, for more than 2 decades, the commission, it seems that the commission has no, Saudi Nigerian Commission had no mandate, a clear-cut mandate to what actually both countries can benefit, both openings that is available in Nigeria and that what is also available in Saudi. The truth remains that, unfortunately, the major aspect of what we could sell to Saudi, which is the crude, the only exporting item or raw material we have is the crude. Saudi has crude in abundance. Then what other businesses opportunities that can also attract Nigerians or attract the Saudis to Nigerians? So these are what the commission ought to be looking at. The committee ought to be looking at available opportunity. Good enough now that the Saudis are picking interest in our petroleum sector to revamp most of our moribund refineries. But how visible is that? How? Because I know for sure the difficulties they're going to encounter. Saudi is just an oil producing country. They are not into equipment manufacturing or the technologies required to run those very facilities. The problem is not the crude. The problem is not producing crude. The problem is management of those very machineries that are used for the refining of the products. Okay. Yes, I know they have an upper hand because they have functional refineries. They export petroleum product. They also export crude. I know they can get into engagement with those Germans, with those Russians, with those Americans, with those Belgians that are into fabrication and manufacturing of this very equipment that is needed to maintain this refinery. That is where the real issue is. So I'm kind of still trying to understand what Nigeria will get from this very aspect. If not, except I'm not looking at the existing refinery. Rather, I'm looking at building a fresh, new brand refinery. That is where we needed the most, not on this very existing refinery. Some of these refineries have existed for more than 60 years, some 50 years, some 40 years old. And most of these very equipment used in the development or building of the refineries are obsolete. You can't find their parts. You can't go to manufacturers to get them except the original builders of this refinery. So I'm kind of still confused what Nigeria will actually get from Saudi in revamping this moribund refinery. But rather, I should look at building a fresh refinery with $5 to $6-7 billion. You will build over 300 barrel capacity of refinery, and that is enough to solve the petroleum product problem we have. 300,000 barrels processing capacity is good enough to solve our problem. So I'm kind of still confused. Their capacity of Saudis to revamp this moribund refinery, because like I said earlier, they don't have the machineries. They may have the expertise. They may have the connection more than we do. Okay, so Steve, how would they be in a better position to enter into agreement with the original builders of this refinery, except we are going to sell it to them?
The second leg of the pledge, if you like, or the promise that Nigeria, seem to have reached, agreement that have been reached, is that the Saudi government pledged to make substantial deposit of foreign exchange to boost Nigeria's forex liquidity. Of course, these are the two major issues bothering Nigeria right now economically, when you talk about the issue of fuel production and also the issue of forex. So the Saudi government is pledging to deposit foreign exchange to boost Nigeria's forex liquidity. How is that even possible? How is that? What is the practicability of this? What are we really looking at when we say that the Saudi government will, make such deposit in Nigeria?
Honestly, it doesn't make any economic sense. Are they Father Christmas deposit? Except you're telling me it's coming as a foreign portfolio investment, that Saudi government will start investing in most of our bonds or Euro bonds, or pick up some deposits from our commercial bank, except on that grant, because there's no way you can do investment or make deposit except for a purpose. Either you pick up our Euro bonds, which I expect that's where the money will be channeled, because you can't just make deposits. You are making deposit for what? You make the deposit for either investment, or you are making deposit to build or buy properties, or to acquire lands, or to even buy, like I said, the moribund refineries and take over them. So I expect that the money will come as investment, not as a deposit. You can't just deposit money. You rather make investment in form of foreign direct investment or foreign portfolio investment. If it's in portfolio, you are buying securities quoted at the floor of Nigerian Stock Exchange, or you are buying entities or companies run and privately owned or publicly owned by Nigerians or government of Nigeria. You are buying over them from the capital market, or you can even do a private business deals, or you can also fix those monies in our commercial bank. So these are the ways investment can be attracted. Then if it comes as a foreign direct investment, it's coming like you want to build one factory, you want to go into grains production, and which I know is an opening for them to move into grain production. So there must be a form of investment, not just as a deposit. So the term deposit is wrongly used. It's coming as an investment, either as a portfolio investment or foreign direct investment. So government should be sure of what agreement or what bilateral agreement they have reached with Saudi. Okay, so it cannot just come as deposit. Are they depositing money?
Let me just quickly jump in, Steve. How about converting, I don't know, I'm just thinking aloud. How about converting the billions of naira that we pay for Hajj, into, not the dollar now. How about converting into the currencies of both countries instead of going through the dollar route? Is that going to in any way impact also in our foreign exchange?
Yes, of course it will. These are the areas we expect the government to be looking at. How can we nairalize most of these travels? Just like we have the Air Peace making efforts to be airlifting Nigerians to Saudi so that you don't book your flights using the dollar. You rather use naira to book flights. So these are the areas where government can also get to trap most of these very forests that is being used for these transactions. Most of the trips, if we can have 80 to 90% of the flights that they pass Nigeria to UAE, to Saudi, being run by Nigerians, it means that 70 to 80% of these very forests that is used for these transactions are being trapped in Nigeria. So because you are going to be booking your flight using naira, so those money will not exceed or leave the shores of Nigeria. So these are the area we expect. You can also have such agreements with foreign airlines or with foreign governments that all transactions, both visa payments and the rest, will be done with naira. But the question is, these are the monies they've earned legitimately, except they invest that money, reinvest that money in your country. It's still their money. One day they will demand for the money because they've earned it legitimately. They have done legitimate business in your country and they have earned it. So at any point in time they want to leave, that is what is called capital repatriation. Is allowed, is legal. So at every point in time, they will demand from CBN conversion of this money earned to dollar, because dollar is the only way they can exit the shores of Nigeria. So except we move into bilaterals to sell other commodities, we have a lot of mineral resources that Saudi may be needing for. So except to say, okay, all we have owed, all your proceeds, let's move them through raw materials to you. So this is a way of also trapping those money remaining in the shores of Nigeria. So I think it's beyond the issue of deposits or issue of attracting those forests. It's a question of getting them to stick this money as an investment in the shores of Nigeria. Investment in these areas I've mentioned. There are many places, many areas they can develop capacity. Our raw materials are West India. They have need for a lot of raw materials. In our petroleum sector, they are well experienced. They can build refineries. If they come in with $7 to 8 or $5 billion, that can build a very standard 300,000 capacity refinery, and that will solve the petroleum needs of Nigeria. These are the kind of extracting commitment we need from such oil-rich country. So these are the areas government should be expecting to extract commitments.
Has pushed, saying that it's one of his major agenda about getting investment. And then his spokesman, during Glale, came out to say one of the promises that the president made in the Saudi Africa summit is some of the world's highest return on investment if they should come and invest in Nigeria. So do you think we are at the right place to make that kind of promises, like promising a very huge gain when it comes to the investment that we are demanding Saudi Arabia to come put in our country?
To an extent, I agree with Mr. President that Nigeria remains one of the highest yield or investment yield or return country of the world, in the sense that even in our capital market, as we speak, the capital market gain is over 37% as at yesterday closure of trading at the floor of Nigerian stock exchange. And it seems like Nigeria is going to be the Nigerian capital market is going to be the most at performing capital market in 2023, again, just like we had in 2020 when COVID was around, but we beat every other capital market in the world. So returns on investment is there, but the only big challenge we have is insecurity. The issues around security and the instability of our exchange market that have eroded confidence, and it also eroded gains that most of these foreigners or most of these investments in Nigeria have. Nigeria remains, because we run a capital market, we run a capital system whereby investors decide their prices. There is little or no regulations around price sanity and price modulation. So you can wake up and sell your item at any price, just like what is going on in the cement industry. They are making huge profits. So in every other sectors, people are so making huge profit. And our tax regime is quite low, in the sense that if you compare what is going on in UK, take for instance, in UK alone, you pay close to 35% in every single liter of petrol you buy. 30%. More than that you pay as tax. Ours is just 5%. Ours is just 5%, but in UK is about 30%. So like I said, return on investments, yes, Nigeria has a high yield return on investment. So the only question is insecurity and the naira devaluation. That is the instability of our naira exchange market. That is where we have big challenges, because most of the gains, most of the profit they have gained are all eroded because of this very devaluation.
Steve, the president also called on collaboration, on the security issues, challenges affecting the nation as well. So do you think that is the first step that needs to be taken before they talk about subsequent issues?
Yes, security issues should be an inward approach. It should not be an outward approach. Yes, you may need some level of collaboration in weaponry, in equipment, or even in technology. So you need that, but it should be an internal thing that you have to resolve as a government to deal with the issue of insecurity and criminality. And they are all going up. You don't deal with kinetic approaches. You use all the unkinetic approach, in the sense that what is driving most of these social vices is the rising unemployment rate. People are losing their jobs, and they are resulting in criminalities and crime. So government needs to tackle this very issue. It has to be an internal resolution. It's a multi-phase approach, in the sense that you need a lot to do with improving employment. You also need a lot to do with issues around the rising insecurities that ordinarily it has no economic values. Some insecurities has some economic triggers, but some are just for the purpose of wickedness of people that goes into houses, slaughter and kill people. People go to farms and they demand for ransoms, and they make it ungovernable. It makes farming becoming so difficult for some rural farmers. Some of these farmers have become fugitives in their own land. They've run away from their ancestral homes. So, like I said, there are economic issues and there are non-economic security issues. So government should have a resolution to internally solve these things, while expecting this very collaboration from foreigners in equipment, in technology, and in other areas that may assist the government deal with the issue. But it has to be an internal thing to deal with these very issues that we have.
Okay, so Steve, briefly, if you may, you've touched on that. I understand the issue of security as one of the hindrances, but what are some other hindrances that you think have been in the way of, getting investors to come in and also to implement some of the memorandum of understanding that we've signed with Saudi Arabia in the past?
First is the content of this very memorandum. Who drafted them? Who engineered them? What was the purpose? Sometimes most of us accuse our leaders to be some transitional leader, transactional leaders. They go into such memorandums or such agreements or such dialogue, having these transactional mindsets. What is in for me? What is in for my people? So these are the things that perhaps for kind of be stands as interest to most of these very agreements that you often see Nigerian government and officials enter into until we start having leaders that will go into such meetings and having this mindset or having this Nigeria first interest, where every line item in those agreements are to benefit Nigeria. When you start benefiting them, when you start focusing on their private pocket, what comes to them, you start finding that most of these very countries of nations or companies that goes into these bilaterals will start remaining because they know what they've added for you. They know how many percentage of these very transactions that you will benefit. So this is where the issue is. Who is involved in this very bilateral, and of whose interest is this bilaterals? It should be a win-win, both for the host country and for the visiting country, in the case now Nigeria. What is there for the Saudis to gain? And what is there for Nigerians to gain? These are the only things that drive this very bilateral. And a follow-up visibility of these very agreements too also is one of the key issues, because most times you go into this agreement just for the propaganda's sake, just for the news bites. They don't go into this agreement looking at that very little they can extract. They are looking for the breaking news, breaking stories. These are the things. They know for sure that this government cannot be able to do some of these things they've agreed to do. And because they need it as a soundbite, they come back home singing the song. At the end of the day, nothing will be implemented. It will be a zero movement or a zero agreement. So we need some people who are realistic, who are nationalistic, who put the interests of Nigeria first. If it's just one petroleum, one refinery, like now they are talking about 4, how realistic is it? That's the point. Just single one. Say, okay, deal with the issue of Port Harcourt refinery. Make sure that Port Harcourt refinery is working. That sounds more better than to say 4 of them.
Okay, well, I mean,
so these are the things.
If they say 4, I mean, what are we? It's to our benefit. So if they say 4, they will do 4. Fine, let them do 4. If they want to do 10, if they want to build new ones, we're all good by it. What is important is that whatever has been agreed should be implemented, isn't it?
I agree with you, but like I said, how realistic is for them to build 4 refinery or revamp your moribund 4 refinery?
It's up to them, but thank you so much. It's up to them, Steve, but thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning and sharing your own perspectives on this issue. We appreciate it. We look forward to having you again on the program.
Thanks again for having me.